Okay, this video is on how I adjust the fuel level in the Zenith carburetor. So normally what I do is I start with the top half of the carburetor. I go ahead and put on the float and the valve. And what I'm looking for is to set it level with the top part of the carburetor upside down. So I'm looking at this edge in the center of the float, and I set it level. Now that's a really good starting point, and that's where a lot of guys set it and leave it. But when I do the regular test, I find that a lot of times that's too high. And what happens when it's too high, here's what happens when your fuel level is too high. Okay, the bowl fills up. Now if the valve sticks and you're just dumping gas everywhere, normally that's from the valve not closing. And the fuel bowl fills up, and it flows over to here inside the top half, and it drains out this hole right here. And then you see gas just dumping all over the place. Now, normally when gas is just dumping, that's why. Now, if you have a small leak or a drip, if the fuel level is too high, or say higher than the jets, because the fuel levels itself through the secondary well and levels into the jets. So now this level is higher than the top of your main jet, fuel will drip out of that jet. So that's why you can't have the fuel level, you don't want it too high. Even if it's not overflowing, if it's still higher than that, you're gonna have a leak. So it's really important that you set the fuel level right to spec, 5/8 of an inch from the top to the level. And when I do that, I made a video on how I check that. You can see the other video. This video is on setting it. So when I determine that the level's too high, I want to shim the valve down to close the float earlier. And what I do is, here's the valve and here's the shim. And when we put, I'll try to do this. When we put the valve in with one shim that comes in your kit, there's two in there. One's for the valve, one's for the fuel screen. And then you use that, and then what you could do is you buy a shim kit. It's only a couple dollars, gives you different thicknesses of shims. Here's the part number. And what you do is, if this is not level and the fuel level is too high, you add shims underneath this valve, which raises this valve up, and that closes the float, comes up and closes the valve sooner. So you kind of have to play with it. Start with a thin one and add till you get the right amount of shims. This carburetor right here, if you look at level, I have a thick and one really thin shim in there, and that's set it pretty close to level. I'll double check. I may have to add one more thin one, but I'll check on my other setup with a clear line, which you can see the other video for that. That's pretty much it. Now, bending the float to set the level is not recommended at all, and I'll show you kind of why. Here's a float that I took out of a carburetor. Really nice looking float, but somebody bent it with a screwdriver, and you can see they didn't, when they did that, even where the pin goes through is now crooked. So now when it goes in, this float sits in there sideways. So it's not recommended to bend in the floats. The best way is to go ahead and shim the valve. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, go ahead and post up.